The following was recorded in front of a live studio audience at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe.
Greater Salem, New Hampshire Chamber of Commerce presents Success in the 603, a podcast focusing on Granite Staters who have had success in the public or private sector. We'll hear stories of how these people came to be, where they are, and what you can do to get there too. Sit back and enjoy. You are in wicked awesome company.
Well, welcome everyone. My name's Donna Morris, and I serve as the president of the Greater Salem Chamber of Commerce, and welcome to Success in the 603. We're having a lot of fun doing this, and my co-host, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Craig Dufton. I'm with Keller Williams Realty. I'm also the owner of United Compressor and Pump, and I'm also a proud member of the Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah, so that's a good thing to be.
Here we are in Studio 21. By the way, we got to give a shout out to our Studio 21. We never mention it. Two Guys Smoke Shop.
Yeah, we wouldn't have done this without Studio 21. I mean, just come on in and bring your show to life, and there's a lot of opportunity for people to do that out there.
It is great.
It's been a lot of fun. This is show 3.
It's amazing.
And it's a lot of fun.
And our guests keep getting better and better and better and better and better every single time. And they're all dressed so nicely. Who is our guest today, Don? Why don't you introduce
Oh, no, you do the introductions. It's Paul
okay.
Parisi. And
It is Paul Parisi. He's the Salem's own Paul Parisi. He was a long time, and we'll talk about his fire experience, but he's now the New Hampshire State Fire Marshal. So welcome to our show, Paul. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Donna.
Happy Thanksgiving to you.
I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
Well, we're honored to have you because you have just been an amazing asset for Salem, and we lost you in July. We lost you to the state.
Well, we're sharing it.
Well,
never
yeah,
fully.
he
You're
gets
still
to
living
come
in
home
Salem,
too.
right? It's
He's
good.
a Rotarian with me still, but it's, it was a great gain for the whole state. I mean, Paul's a great guy, and I've known him personally as well as as much professionally as I've needed to over the years. Thank God his boys did save my kid one time, so we're good. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? How long you've been in Salem? How long you were involved in the fire department here? I mean, it was a long time. And what the most important question we need to know is, how did you get the nickname the Pup? You know who told
you that?
You
anyway.
know who told me to ask that question? A certain guy who couldn't take it anymore and had to retire. So,
okay.
You know who I'm talking about?
I do know who you're talking about. I started at Salem Fire in January of 1989. I actually grew up in Reading, Massachusetts, and went to high school there, graduated in 1987, and I had enlisted in the Army National Guard on my 17th birthday. So I had done about 10 months of National Guard time, and then as soon as I graduated from high school, went right into basic training. Okay. And went to Fort Jackson, South Carolina for basic training, and then went to Fort Sam Houston, Texas for combat.
Army National Guard?
Army National Guard, yep.
Okay.
Yep. So came back from that was somewhere in the vicinity of 18 to 20 weeks of training, and started working with my stepfather actually, and then also started going to school full time for my associate's degree in fire science at North Shore Community College in Beverly. And
so did you always want to be a fireman? Was it?
Long as I can remember.
Really? Wow.
Always,
see, now we've had that. This is the third week we've asked that question, and the first person who has answered that they've always wanted to be. That's great.
Used to walk to school in Reading. I grew up on the west side of Reading, and whether it was the Prospect School or the Barrows School, when I'd walk to school, I'd go by the firehouse, and I always just admired the trucks.
Every kid did. I mean, when you're a kid, you just
stuck with me, though.
The kids now, they're so enamored with it, and yet you stuck with it.
It stuck with me. I used to stop in, see the guys, and that's always what I've wanted to do, and I'm blessed that I was able to do exactly what I've wanted to do. I mean, they say if you love doing your job, you never work a day in your life, and certainly there's tough days in the profession that I'm in, but by and large, I've absolutely loved my job for my entire career. I'm very lucky.
So how did you end up here in Salem in the 603? What drew you to the 603?
A test. My friend and I started taking firefighter entrance examinations all throughout New England.
And is your friend now a firefighter?
He is, yep. He's not here. No, he's still working.
Okay.
He's in Woburn, Mass. He's a lieutenant in Woburn.
Okay.
He grew up in Woburn. I grew up in Reading, and we were in a fire explorer post together down there when we were, like 14 years old. We were in an explorer post.
So
Nice.
what's this test? Tell us a little
It
more.
was essentially a general aptitude test to be a firefighter, and then there was an agility test, a strength test. So you'd go and run, sit-ups, push-ups, balance beam, that kind of thing. And
So you have to crawl through like holes and stuff
you
like that
do
to
now.
make sure that you're not like a
claustrophobic.
Yeah.
You do now.
Really?
The test that I took back in '88, it wasn't like that, but the new test is just like
Did
that.
they
Yeah.
bring that in because they found out they had a bunch of people who were claustrophobic?
Perhaps.
Or,
I mean,
really?
that's it's a national. It's kind of a national standard test
okay,
now.
cool.
So, but the one that I did was a little bit simpler than that. But we tested in Nashua, Salem, Portland, Maine, down the Cape. Of course, the Mass Civil Service test, which at the time comprised most all Massachusetts communities, was the Mass Civil Service test. But,
So each area is giving the test, and then if you do well, they'll contact you. It's not like
Right.
an SAT where you're taking it, and then they look at your scores and say, hey, why don't you come on up? And
That's correct.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So
that's
it's,
correct. That's at least that's the way it was when I was doing it back then. And Salem was the first to call. So the only thing
Nice.
I really knew about Salem was our family had a campground or a campsite and a campground in Hampstead called Sunset Park, where I grew up as a kid, and still have a campsite there. And
I'm thinking you always made the campfires. I put you in charge.
I put them out.
Yeah, all right.
But we'd stop at Granite State Potato Chip
Oh,
on the
that's
way
right.
up, and that's literally really the only thing I knew about Salem was
Right.
Granite State Potato Chip. We'd stop. They would stop at Market Basket or Demoulas, and then we'd stop at Granite State Potato Chip on a Friday night, and then that was it. So that's really the only thing I knew about Salem when I came up here, and this
and
is
that was
my
what time?
life.
88, 89, right?
89. I got hired in January of '89. Yeah, so the testing was all through '88, and
Okay.
and so I've been here ever since. I moved up within a year of getting on the job. I moved up here, started by renting a room, eventually got an apartment, and had a couple of houses, a divorce and that kind of thing. But I've been here ever since. All my children have been raised here. It's a wonderful community.
Three great kids.
Yes, indeed.
Yep.
They are indeed.
They grew up with my kids.
Yes,
Our
they
kids.
did.
Yep. So how about let's talk about you moving up in the ranks, and then and we're gonna take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll talk about how you moved up in Salem.
Sure.
Very obviously you from '89 till 2018, long time.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So just a quick shout out to our sponsors, and we want to thank them because success in the 603 is made possible through their support. So we'd like to thank, first of all, Travis Terry and Company, CPA, located on 25 Main Street in Salem, New Hampshire. Travis Terry and Company operates under the foundation of honesty and integrity and hard work for you. They make taxes less taxing, so be sure to give them a call. Tax season's right around the corner, 603-898-2511. And relatively near Granite State Potato Chip Factory is Canopy Lake Park. So we'd like to thank Canopy Lake Park for their support. Just for fun, for over 115 years, Canopy Lake Park has been leading the way in family entertainment. This year for the holiday season, give the gift of a memory with tickets to Canopy Lake Park. They make great stocking stuffers. Visit them at www.canopylakepark.com.
Nice. Thank you, Canopy Lake, and thank you, Travis. So let's get back to you. We're talking with Paul Parisi, the New Hampshire State Fire Marshal. So you start in. You're gung-ho. You've reached it. This is your goal. How old were you when you came in? 19,
Well, that goes back. That
20?
goes no, not even.
Yeah,
19.
I was 21. So
that's where the pup comes from.
That's that's
because
where
I
the pup comes
was the young pup. I was the youngest guy on the job.
Nice.
And I still am probably in the top 5 as far as starting. You know what I mean? As far as being that young. But so
did you answer to it? Do you answer to it?
Oh yeah. I'm going to meet a couple of retirees tonight for dinner, and there's no doubt every time I call on the phone, they'll say, "Hey, pup, what's up?" Yeah, it's always stuck with me, and I'm proud of it. It's been pretty cool. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So talk about your career there in Salem. Talk about it.
Yeah, so I got hired in January of '89 and worked as a firefighter for 8 years. Got promoted to fire inspector in sometime in 97. Sometime in 97, got promoted to fire inspector, and then lieutenant in 2000, and then deputy chief in 2001.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, and it's so.
Was that before 9/11 or after 9/11?
It was just before. It was July of 2001. Because it's funny you mentioned that, Craig, because I always try to remember what the dates that I get promoted, and I remember very specifically.
It's a hard date to forget for you.
Well,
absolutely.
That's absolutely it is. But it was. I remember I was a brand new deputy chief when 9/11 happened. So it was I think it was July of 2001. I got promoted to deputy, and then September 11th happened. But
well, let's talk about that because there were two great celebrations I was at this year. One was you becoming the fire marshal. It was great to be there. I'm glad I was there. Donna was there as well. And the other one was a 9/11 breakfast that we have with the Rotary every year. And you've been gracious. Your guys have been gracious. And then this year, Wyndham opened their doors to us. And you were the speaker. You were one of the speakers. And another Rotarian, Jim Smith, was our other speaker. And my mom was there too. And I was blown away. I mean, between the two of you, I was just absolutely blown away because it was two on-the-ground perspectives of, the greatest tragedy that we've had here in a long time. So, talk about that just really quick.
Yeah, I loved listening to Jim, especially because he inserted a lot of humor into it, which was great. Unfortunately, my story wasn't that funny, but it's a day that any firefighter that was working at that time will never forget that day. And it's seared into our memories. We still talk about it. We will always talk about it. No matter how much time passes, we always have to remember that we can't forget that day.
Nope.
And the lessons that we should take from that day.
And we do have that great celebration every year. And every year the guests are amazing. The speakers are incredible. If you ever get a chance to see that, the Rotary hosts that every year, and it's just a special day.
Paul, along those lines, you had alluded to this earlier when you were talking about, there can be some tough days. And I'm hearing more and more about, in addition to 9/11, just the toll it takes on a firefighter. Can you talk a little bit about, a little bit about maybe what you go through, but what you see as a leader in your industry, and also the people you have to lead. You have to lead. You're asking them to go through some pretty challenging circumstances, both physically and emotionally. I mean, what type of character does someone have to lead these people or to be a firefighter?
Boy, that's a great question. I'll start by saying that post-traumatic stress disorder in emergency responders, whether it's fire, police, EMS, obviously, or military, is a real thing. Folks struggle with it every day. There are way too many emergency responder suicides than there should be, and it's certainly way above the national average. It just takes a toll when you see things that most people don't see, and you see just really unfortunate circumstances. You see human bodies in places and positions that they shouldn't be, and in configurations. It's very sad, and
I think people forget. You guys are, you're heroes in our eyes, and we just glorify. But you earn that hero. You earn it absolutely with what you have to deal with to keep us safe. And
I appreciate you saying that. And it's not just it's not just fires. It's medical emergencies here in Salem. Our firefighters, are a tremendous asset to the community as far as their skill set, and but they see. They see bad things, unfortunately, and it's a cumulative effect. But there may be certain triggers that would hit a firefighter or a police officer or EMT that can trigger something.
As a supervisor, though, Paul, how did you identify that you've seen it? Obviously, you've seen your men, you've seen the men and women that work for you have these issues. How do you get better at identifying that? I mean, how does someone out there looking for that?
Well, I think that if you live it, then you know it.
Right.
And you can see it, you can recognize it, right? I think that it would be a lot more difficult for someone who's never experienced it to try to recognize that in someone. But, I think that, there's the common signs that are out there. But that's why we find it so important that people that do this job stay connected to other people that do this job, because it's the people within our profession that are going to probably recognize it first. Their family may recognize it. Their family may see the signs and symptoms, but may not recognize what it is.
Right.
but it's our own folks that are going to say something's up with Joe.
And be able to help because they've been through the experience. I think that's what military and police and fire and all those, you recognize it and then, hey, I'm here to help.
Sure, and that helps.
Your adrenaline's cranking. Your body is just going through so many physical things at that time. Your awareness, your alertness, your mental state, everything is going, and your nerves. And obviously, you've got to have some fear too. There's got to be that fear that you.
Anybody that says they're not afraid is lying.
Right.
But I think that part of the help is letting them know that it's okay to say that you're hurting.
Yep.
And it's also breaking that barrier down of the machoism. Fire and police have police have more females than firefighters do, but traditionally it's a very male-oriented or dominated job.
Sure.
Not that it should be or has to be, but it just is. It's just a fact.
Yep.
And the macho airs that we put on are real, and you have to drop that in order to get through that PTSD or that, it might not even be PTSD, just that the hurting that goes on with a particular call or a certain set of circumstances.
Yeah. Amazing stuff. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Paul. I couldn't call you Michael.
That's right. Michael was last week.
I called him the wrong name last week. I'm calling Paul the wrong name this week. I'm just don't know what I'm doing today.
Thank you, Sally.
Donna, why don't you do a commercial? That gets me off the hook a little bit, and then I can get back to Paul.
Sure. Okay, let's take a minute. Success in the 603, again, is made possible through the support of our sponsors. If you're interested in sponsoring our vodcast, definitely call the Chamber at 893-3177. But we want to thank Pika's. In 1939, Albert Pappy Pika opened up Pika's Garden Night Cafe. 80 years later and 3 generations later, his great-grandson Shane is picking up where Pappy left off with Pika's Pub and Grill. They offer great food, drinks, and a staff that's always wearing a smile. Open 7 days a week. You can check them out at 10 Ayers Village Road in Methuen, Mass., right over the Salem border, or the line, the state line. Pika's Pub and Grill is looking forward to serving Merrimack Valley for another 80 years. So thank you to Pika's.
Thank you, Pika's. Love Pika's. So, your deputy chief by the time 2001 rolls around.
Right.
And then you were in that position that was with Breen, correct? As Chief Breen?
Well, actually, Arthur Barnes was
Arthur
fire
Barnes,
chief.
okay.
Yeah. So
okay.
I was Arthur's deputy from 2001 until he retired in January of 2005. Kevin took over, and then I was his number 2 for 9 years.
Right.
Yeah. Well, yeah, 10 years, I think. Yeah.
Right. It's 2018.
Yeah. Because Kevin left in 2015, I believe. That's when I began.
And now
chief.
we have Larry Best, who's
yes, he was my assistant chief, and now he's been appointed chief of department.
So let's talk about from different levels of management in the firehouse itself. You've basically been almost at every level of management there. How did you adjust from one to the other? How do you go from being one of the guys to not one of the guys anymore?
Being in charge of the guys.
Being in charge of the guys. How does that transition for people?
It's some people transition more easily than others, and but it's not an easy transition no matter who you are. I think being a subordinate or being a firefighter, I think is a benefit to then being a boss, because you've been there, so you know what your guys are going through.
Yep.
To be able to just put somebody in charge of a unit that's never done that job before, I think there's a loss of credibility
and respect too. You've got the respect that's earned from putting your time in. Yeah.
But it isn't easy, when you are used to hanging out with the guys, and then now you got to hold them accountable. It can be difficult. But the best way to make sure that you don't fall into the trap is to be a good firefighter when you're doing that job.
Right.
You know what I mean? So if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing and following the rules as a firefighter, when you become a boss, it's easier to then enforce the rules and hold people accountable, because you don't necessarily have people telling you, well, when you were a firefighter, you never followed the rules, and now you're telling me I have to. So
right.
I mean, I think that's not just a fire service. That's pretty common management technique, but nevertheless,
but you get more responsibility as you go up. You get deputy chief. You're in charge of. Now, what's the deputy chief in charge of?
When I was the deputy, it was fire prevention and communications.
Okay.
And which I tell people this all the time. As chief, I really was appreciative of the fact that I had some time in fire prevention, because I got to meet an awful lot of people in the community, business owners, property owners, and so forth. I got to understand the challenges that they have when running their business, and understand what it means when someone comes in and says, I need you to correct this, and it's going to cost you $5,000 or $10,000, the dramatic impact that can have in a business. Right. That really resonated with me as a fire inspector, and then as deputy chief. I think that I've always been appreciative of that, and actually it transitioned really well into the role I currently have as the fire marshal.
Really? How so?
Oh yeah. Well,
just gave you that. Now you're doing it on a macro scale instead of a micro scale. You're doing it statewide.
Yeah, I think that even the governor himself is very pro-business. He wants to make sure that businesses are going to succeed. If we over-regulate things, then it could be a barrier or suppress the economy. And so we have to balance between what's good fire prevention practice and policy, and what's over-regulation. And I think that I'm fortunate that my experience in the street and fire prevention has given me enough perspective that when you create a rule or a law or a policy, that there are long ranging impacts to that policy, and so therefore you just want to be careful. Right. We want to be careful about what we regulate.
Right.
So I think that it's helped even in the 100 days that I've been the fire marshal.
Excellent. Well, we're going to talk about you being the fire marshal. And
I just wanted to say, Jeff Emanuelson went through the Chamber's leadership program, and he actually spoke to the group as well as being a student going through it. And he was in a group, and we talk about leadership and different personalities, and how there's a group, some people have the personality where they question. There was someone in the group with Jeff who was also a volunteer firefighter. Mm-hmm. And what I found really interesting is that the scenario I had given them was like, someone's changing what you're doing and not telling you why. What do you do? And we had this whole personality where people would be like, no, I want to know why. And the volunteer fire person, as well as Jeff, were like, you got to trust your leadership. You can't, if you're in the middle of fire, you can't stop and say, why do you want me to, go left instead of right? You got to trust your leader in the field and ask questions later. And I think that's, can you comment on that? Do you see that? I mean, this...
Yeah, so I think that, obviously there are a whole host of different leadership styles, and I think that, my personal style tends to be more of a servant leadership style than anything else. I tend to be more collaborative, but there's about 10% of the job that you have to be a dictator. And that's when you're under fire conditions, and you have to be able to say, no, this is what I need you to do, and those who are following have to be able to respect you enough to follow those orders. And it's no different than the military. Now, there's always a safety valve. There's always, well, what if that company sees something that you don't see? You need to be able to have the flexibility that company officer needs to be able to report that back to you. Hey, chief, I think I see something you don't, and that might change things. But barring that, there's always got to be that respect that, no, if I'm sending you someplace, it's because I believe this is where you need to be, and this is what we need to do to mitigate this situation. So yeah, I think that, obviously Jeff's absolutely right. He's been doing it for a long time, and but there's a variety of leadership styles I think that you can employ in all of our jobs.
Absolutely. You going to do a commercial?
Oh, sure. I'm going to do a commercial. I always wait for you to just tell me. That's
okay.
Good. I'm like, hey.
Donna, do a commercial.
Success in the 603. Woo woo. So again, thank you to our sponsors. We're going to do a quick shout out to two more right now. So speaking of fire, we have SFC Engineering Partnerships. So SFC Engineering Partnerships is a multidisciplined engineering consulting firm conveniently located in Windham, New Hampshire. So the SFC stands for Structural, Fire Protection, and Civil Engineering. Great engineering company right out there in Windham, and they engineer projects for private, commercial, industrial, and many municipal projects. So they've been in business for over 20 years. You can learn more at www.sfceng.com. And also Tuscan Brands. Tuscan, thank you for your sponsorship.
Yummy.
Yes, Tuscan Kitchen encompasses the authentic taste of Italy and shares it with their guests. Everything is prepared in-house. All of their pastas are fresh. Their bread is crafted daily in their artisan bakery. It smells great over there, and their desserts are carefully created by master pastry chefs. Visit one of their 2 locations in Salem or Portsmouth, New Hampshire, or one of their 2 Massachusetts locations in Burlington or the Seaport, Boston. Thank you very much, Tuscan Brands.
Well, Paul and I have the pleasure of eating at the Tuscan Kitchen every morning.
We do. Friday
morning.
mornings. Not every morning.
Every morning.
Although it would be nice. Every Friday morning at the Rotary at 7:30.
Yes,
so
indeed.
That's where you'll find us. So, Paul, I wanted to talk to you about some of your influences because you've had some great mentors. You've got some great leaders there in Salem over the years. You have a previous state marshal too, as well, and you had Arthur Barnes too, as well as Kevin Breen. So. It's these guys are your biggest influences, or is there somebody besides that, outside of that?
Those guys certainly have been. As a matter of fact, I saw Don just last week, Don Bliss, down at the National Fire Protection Association, where he's now a regional vice president in charge of field operations. And
nice.
Great guy, and he obviously did a lot for Salem. He did a lot for Salem Fire Department. But I was actually thinking on the way here about who has been probably the most influential, and there's probably 2 that have been tremendously influential, perhaps 3. One was one of my first sergeants in the Army National Guard.
Okay.
His name was Tom O'Neill, and just a fantastic guy, a big guy, rugged guy, but just a teddy bear. But he could tell you where the dog died if he had to.
Yeah.
But I think that watching him, and I was a fairly young soldier then, and I think he promoted me up through sergeant. I'm not sure if he was still there when I made staff sergeant or not, but he certainly was a tremendous influence and a mentor to me with regards to leadership. Just the way he was able to command the respect of the soldiers underneath him, the way that he was really where I learned lead by example, and he just had a great way about him. So there's him, and then of course Kevin Breen, and Kevin
Sure.
and I. Kevin came on about 2 years before I did, and our careers really paralleled each other. When he was, we were both union officials together. He was the president, I was his secretary. He became a lieutenant, I was a firefighter. He became a deputy, I was a lieutenant. We literally just leapfrogged all the way up. He was assistant chief, I was deputy, then finally I was his assistant chief for 9 years. And
was a great mentor all the way up. He was just showing you the ropes all the way up.
Absolutely,
Excellent.
yeah. He's still a great friend, but we went through a lot together, and I have the utmost respect for him, for what he was able to show me, and it really was all about mentoring. He didn't force anything on me, but he basically said, come follow me, and I did, and I'm a better person because of it.
Oh, that's good.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So, you said there was a third?
Yeah, well, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about my Boy Scout experience.
Oh, okay.
And
Okay.
I was, and I talked about this
Eagle
a little
Scout?
bit. I am an Eagle Scout.
Excellent.
Yep, I am. And I had a tremendous Boy Scout experience. I said I was in the Explorers. That's another kind of arm of the Boy Scouts. But my Boy Scout experience went from Cub Scout all the way up through Eagle Scout.
Wow.
And my mom and stepdad really pushed me to make sure that I went, I attended, and I'm so thankful for that. And ultimately, my stepfather was ended up being the Scoutmaster. So the previous Scoutmaster, Frank Stockwell, and then my stepfather, I think both of them during my formative years, during my teenage years, really had a lot of positive influence.
And what was your Eagle Scout project? What'd you do?
My Eagle Scout project was building a trail and a bridge through a conservation area in Reading. Oh. And so, I had to go out and do fundraisers and, make sure I get all the guys together to go out and cut the brush and, build the bridge and all that kind of stuff. So, it was neat. Yeah.
Wow, great stuff.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I look back on it now, and I mean, we had a very active troop. We camped every single weekend, whether it was 100 or 10 below. We were in tents camping.
Really?
Oh yeah, the scoutmasters, the previous one, Frank Stockwell, and my stepfather, Ron Horton, they were both very active outdoor guys, and they wanted to make sure that we were, acclimated to all kinds of weather. So it didn't matter what was going on.
You really did learn a lot. I mean, it's survival and all these other things.
Absolutely, yeah, and it actually helped going into the Army.
Translates into your job.
It does. It all connects together. Yeah.
Oh, your personal development just brought your success professionally right along with each other. I mean,
sure did.
I say that all the time. You're never going to be any better professionally than you are personally.
Right.
So you have to always keep making yourself better and better and better, and both of them will go up.
You're right, Craig. Yep.
So let's talk about your fire marshal's job now.
Sure.
You went from being a fireman to a fire marshal.
Yeah.
Pretty cool transition for you. How many years now? 29 years later?
Yeah, almost 30. Yeah, 29 and a half years in Salem, and now I've been about 100 days as the State Fire Marshal, and completely different than, in a lot of respects from what I was used to as a fire chief.
Okay.
But
how so, though? I mean, they're both political positions. I mean, you really do have a little bit of politics involved there.
There's a lot of politics involved. Yeah, I went from having 5 bosses to 430.
That's true. Our great
congressional.
legislature.
I mean, our state legislature is quite large, but
I think it's the largest in the world, isn't it?
Third in the third in the free world. I think. Yeah.
Okay.
But anyway,
and they change every 2 years.
I know, right?
Yeah.
But I was fortunate in that. When I was fire chief here in Salem, and even before that, when I was assistant chief, I was actively involved in the New Hampshire Association of Fire Chiefs. So I would often end up dealing with legislators in various issues, whether it's fire code or the cancel legislation or PTSD or whatever it might have been. So I was exposed to the folks at the State House even before I got the fire marshal's job.
Not to mention our opioid crisis. You've been dealing with legislation for that as well, too.
Yeah. So it's been
fortunately,
and our delegation of representatives have been really supportive of us, and so I've felt pretty comfortable with that so far. But the session is just about to begin. It's not going to begin in January, so it'll be a trial by fire for me in this new position.
Oh, that's a good pun.
Yeah, but so it's not. So what the differences are? It's not going to a firehouse every day.
Yep.
I don't get to look out the window 15 or 20 times a day and see the guys going to work. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And going to help someone. And which is just that's always been my passion is to go out and do that job. So it's more of an office environment, but I will tell you that the people are phenomenal, and it's always about the people, right? It's always and it's such a diverse workforce of
now you're taking Salem, Portsmouth, Pittsburgh, Keene. You've got all of those interests going on,
right?
You've got the staff luckily you have the staff to support all that though too. So
it's pretty thin, but we do
well, maybe you don't have the staff.
I think the governor's going to hopefully help us with that a little bit, and hopefully we'll get some traction to get a little bit more help. But we do.
A lot. I was looking on your website, and we were talking about it before the podcast. I mean, there's like 8 things right here that talk about
fireworks,
mechanical safety and licensing,
education.
Informational bulletins, incident. Oh my God! I should put my glasses on here. Fireworks.
Fireworks.
And when we think about that, everyone lights off fireworks all the time, but you actually come down and
ride safety. You got some familiarity there for sure.
Yes. It's funny. I actually
building
talk to
safety and construction, lightning rods.
Yeah, I tell people all the time we do everything from homicide investigations to bouncy house inspections and everything in between. We really do.
It's an amazing.
Yeah, we have on the investigation side. A lot of people think the fire marshal's offices. They think just fires, and they think about. And so we have 11 sworn law enforcement officers that are experts in investigating the origin and cause of fires, as well as our sworn law enforcement. So if there is a crime, they can criminally charge and have the authority to bring charges or bring the case forward to whatever law enforcement agency is going to handle it, whether it's the county attorneys or the AG or somebody.
Right.
But they have that ability to do that. So and they are involved in homicide cases. There was just one in Exeter where there was fire and there was a death, and it looks like that was probably
suspicious.
Certainly. You know, so there's a lot of things that they deal with on a regular basis. But then outside of that, Donna just talked about amusement rides. Our folks do all of the amusement rides and chairlifts and tramways and everything. Every ski area, all the amusement parks, all are inspected annually by our folks, and they do that with 2 full-timers and a part-timer.
Wow.
That do all of that with a part-time administrative help. We do hazmat. We do all the plumbing licensing and gas licensing in the state is done through the Fire Marshal's office. And then we have a building safety and construction section that we permit all of the construction projects for all the state buildings.
Right.
So it's a busy place.
Yeah,
Wow.
sounds like a lot. Holy.
Plus pub ed too. We have 3 pub ed folks that
The dog.
try
Right?
to get out there.
The
dogs.
Dog's not going around.
I tell Dollar all the time, one of the best parts about my job is being able to go to work and there's 2 beautiful golden labs there, yellow labs. They're both accelerant detection dogs, and they are the sweetest dogs that you could ever meet. And one of them's actually retiring at the end of this year, and we're going to get another one. State Farm Insurance actually underwrites that whole cost.
So does Darla want a retired dog?
Well, I wish I could take one of the retired dogs, but they go with the handler. That's the benefit of that.
Well, Craig, time is flying by.
I know.
So
we're going to get to your quote because I asked you to come up with a quote. Something. I mean, there's got to be something. Yeah,
it's funny because I'm in the middle of reading a book right now called The Gemba Walks, and the Gemba is essentially where something is occurring, and it's really about the lean process. If you've ever heard of lean process basically in production, but the state of New Hampshire really has taken that on and uses lean in a lot of different ways to make sure that we're doing things in the most efficient way. So I thought it would be good to make sure that I'm up to speed on that, and the commissioner, gave me the book and said, happy reading, and so it's been a great book. But one of the things that he says in his book is go see, ask why, and show respect. And I've found myself doing that a lot in this new job because, as I said, being a fire chief is one thing, but the fire marshal's office is a whole different animal. And there are a whole lot of things going on that I don't know about. And the only way to know about them is to submerge yourself in them, So I've been going to see. I've been asking why, and I've tried to, show respect and make sure that folks know that if we're going to make any changes, if we're going to do anything, that I want to make sure I fully understand the process before we start just turning the battleship, if you will. So
wow, that's a great quote.
So go see, ask why, and show respect. That's our Santo Insurance quote of the week.
Yeah.
Excellent, Paul. Paul, it's been great to have you here. We just, every week we do this, we look up and Donna and I are like, what just happened there? 30 minutes goes by. Thank you so much for coming in. And
and sharing your story. Everyone has a story, and it was good to hear yours. And
thanks very much. I'd be remiss if I didn't call out my lovely wife, Darla. And, I think we talked before, we have 8 kids together, but if it wasn't for her respect and her support, I would never be able to do what I'm able to do. So
excellent.
Well, what we'd like to say here is thank you. You've been wicked, awesome company.
Yes. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Craig.
Happy Thanksgiving to you.
Thank you, same. Happy Thanksgiving. Thanks, Donna.
Happy Thanksgiving to you all.
Stay safe, everybody.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, or callers of this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.